I am very attached to him because he was my sort of, patron and savior and saint.
And he's still very active. His weekly
Very,
column, he keeps on writing still. He's one of the few sane voices left. Sometimes you feel that who are not influenced by the powers that be.
yes.
So all set for Colonel Shanetra. So let's see. I'm going to mute now, sir.
Good evening, sir. This music is unforgettable.
It looks like Doordarshan
Hello.
music, right?
Hello.
The old Doordarshan, the original Doordarshan tune.
All right. Now it's time for Mr. Sipal to take over, please.
Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, this is C. Paul Singh, President Nisbat on this side. Today's session is on background verification, essential for healthy culture and safe work environments. Before the session starts, let me welcome all of you. A very good evening, and thank you all for joining this session. I also extend my warm greetings to our eminent speakers of today. Today's interactive session is on background verification essential for healthy and culture and safe work environment. The session shall be addressed by two learned speakers who will be introduced to you by the moderator in due course. Let me now introduce NISBAT, National Institute of Security, Safety, Management, and Applied Technology International. It was established in the year 1993. We started then the training courses in the field of private security, safety, security management, and technology. With the passage of time, NISBAT has become a think tank with an association of more than 90 scholars as on date with us, who have been providing and are providing inputs in these fields. NISBAT established 4 wings. The first is NISBAT Forum, then is NISBAT Academy, then is NISBAT Enterprises, and then is NISBAT Foundation. We are very active at the moment on NISBAT Forum. With these words, I now like to introduce the chairman, Mr. Pawan Ahluwalia. He took voluntary retirement from the parachute regiment of the Indian Army at a very young age and started his own business. A very thoughtful, a very inspiring leader who is adept in creating alliances. He is unafraid of telling the truth in various business meetings. He was the past president and former chairman of the Council of International Investigators, USA, and was awarded Malcolm Thompson and Kautilya Award by this council. After that, so let me open up the subject of today. In the last session in this series of background checking, verification, Dr. Colonel John Chinatra identified the details of the subject, laborious processes and components which are involved, and sometimes to compile the information about the person being hired. All this was discussed by him in the last session. It was also discussed that rapid globalization and expanding international movements make background verifications and checks immensely important. Stringent background checks can help the employer to identify the problems before they could happen by hiring wrong type of employees. Any negligence in the recruiting process or any laxity in the background verification can tarnish the image of the organization, the reputation of the company, and its healthy culture and safe work environment. Negligent hiring can also harm company's reputation if an employee with a shady background is recruited in the company. For maintaining a healthy culture, safe work environment, good quality at the workplace, some standard procedures for background verifications are required to be followed. Good hiring not only improves safety and security at workplace, it also helps to reduce future risks, misbehavior, or violence at the workplace, which may occur by recruitment of a shady employee. The need for subsequent weeding out of wrongly recruited employees can pose a threat to the workplace environment. This can be considerably reduced if there's a proper background verification. A critical insight, I'm again trying to emphasize the critical insight, not that encompass everything. The critical insight into the behavior pattern of your employee would ensure that there will be improved regulatory compliances besides good and safe work environment. Improper background verification can lead to consequences that may have a ripple effect with the passage of time. Just as one rotten apple could spoil the whole basket. So therefore, one has to be very careful. The two speakers of today shall further analyze all these aspects and much more. I leave it to them how to go about and how to analyze them. With these words, I pass on the session to the moderator of the session today, Captain Pavanjit Ahluwalia. Captain Ahluwalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that today we have had registrations from the following countries. That is India, the United Arab Emirates, the United States, Australia, Belgium, and Bangladesh. As I speak, we are streaming live on YouTube and on Zoom. Nismat is looking for sponsors, and we would welcome any sponsors who would like to get their product or idea promulgated. We have a mailing list of about 200,000 organizations and individuals. So it will be very helpful if anyone would like to sort of sponsor. It will help Nismat as well as help them. Today's program has been sponsored by Premier Shield, India Skills, Tag Scores, and JMD Cargo. A word about our president, Mr. Sipal Singh. Mr. Sipal Singh is a master's in English literature and served the government of India in very senior police appointments. He was the first person who raised the Rapid Action Force and also was its first chief. He later raised the Internal Security Academy, which is a central police academy at Mount Abu in Rajasthan, India. During his service, he has been decorated with numerous awards. Significantly, the President's Police Medal for Distinguished Service, the Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Service, the Police Special Duty Medal with Bar, a Sena Medal, and a number of other commendations and rewards. Post-retirement, he's worked with the Tatars as a consultant. He was also the chairman of the technical committee of the Quality Control Council of India, which formulated the standards of the star rating of the private security companies. He was involved in developing the curriculum for private security guards training under the Security Sector Skill Development Council. He was also the head of the committee which designed and worked out national occupation standards for the training of private security guards and qualification pack for the national occupation standards for the firefighters in India. In 2009, the President of India, post his retirement, recognized him as the Security Personality of the Year. He is currently an advisor to the Asian Professional Security Association, the Indian chapter, and is also the Honorary Director General to the Central Association of Private Security Industry in India, and also the Association of Private Detectives and Investigators. Mr. Sipal's face is well known in India as a dynamic security professional. He is frequently called upon to share his views on national television, on homeland security, and other related subjects. Today we have two speakers. The first speaker is Anirban Mandal, who's a Deputy Director with NASSCOM. Anirban has over 24 years of experience in management, technology, and managing industry ecosystems, having initiated his career as a corporate trainer in technology. He's an economics graduate with a postgraduate degree in sales and marketing, and in addition, a certified project manager. His core areas include adoption and introduction to new technologies to disrupt traditional approaches, conceptualizing data centers, and driving technical evolution into key business drivers. His current role at NASSCOM includes spearheading technology vertical nationally to leading various industry initiatives like bettering and standardizing employment processes. His special contribution is leading to scale National Skills Registry from an HR tool to a risk mitigating tool, and finally evolving a standard for the background check processes in the industry. In his moments of leisure, Anirban is an avid photographer and a roadie, has a fine eye for details and angles, and is able to see life through a very broad lens. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Anirban Mandal. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman and President, and my fellow speaker, Colonel Chinatra. So, thank you for that generous introduction. So, directly jumping into the topic, I'll take a different angle. I won't have a presentation, so I will just talk impromptu about this. This is something that I do at NASSCOM, so I will try to put that thing in front of all of you, that what is happening there. So see, two things, like all of us, when we think about background check, when we think about being a background check of an employee when their person joins, is always a risk mitigation activity. That's something that we all know, right? And that's something that that is a practice that all of us follow to mitigate the risk, right? And that's part of the HR processes, so that I think Dr. John would be taking it up. So there is another aspect to this, right? You know, over years, what we have seen is that the background check verification has been evolving, and has been evolving in a very, very different way. Like earlier, it was a very, very conventional kind of checks that used to happen. But right now, somebody in this industry would vouch that the gamut of checks that are happening today has many things to cover. It covers their social media, it covers the personal life of an individual. It covers how they are financially sound, so, and how they are, what kind of medicines that they take. So basically drug checks, how they are in their personal lives. So basically, if there is a case going on, it may be a civil, it may be a traffic signal jumping. So that also gets tracked. So there are many, many things that is happening today, which conventionally we never thought of, that could lead to a background check. It was very, very conventional, like education check, whether my degree was correct or not, and all those things. Now, the fundamental question that comes in, if we do a deep dive, that why so? That why did these checks come up? Why did that horizon is increasing day by day? And that is exactly what the topic is today, like healthy culture and safe work environment. These are two things that are very, very important. Like, and they're linked. It's not that they are two isolated topics. They're very linked. Like, safe work environment comes from two aspects, like as an individual and as an organization. So let's take an example. If I'm working for an organization, I would like to be in company of people who doesn't come from exactly what Mr. President was saying, that he is not a shady character. That's one way to look at it. Like, if I'm working in an organization, there should not be a shady character who's sitting beside my chair and working with me. It can be any kind of shady character, right? We may not know, we may know, he may be a very aggressive person who can do harm while having a discussion. It can be anything. So the point is that having a safe work environment is very, very important as an individual who is working in an organization. Like, so every employee gets affected by it. So having a background check definitely mitigates that part. The other aspect is as an organization. As an organization, I have many, many things to handle. I have many, many things to look after, right? My organization's reputation, the clients that I'm serving, their reputation, and so on and so forth. Like, if a person who comes into my space and does something which is wrong, it affects my reputation and definitely client's reputation. Recently, we have heard the cases about the P-Gate incident with Air India, right? So the company had to let that person go. He was a senior professional, but he had to let that person go. So there are reputation risks that happens with the behavior an individual does. It may not be at the time, or it may not be at the workplace, it may not be in the working time. But whatever I do, it affects the organization that I'm working for. Their reputation, their stake, lot many things gets affected if a proper background check has not been done on an individual. And not a conventional background check, a background check which goes into the depth of finding out what that person does when he's also not working with me. It makes sense. It makes a lot of, it gives a lot of ideas, a lot of views about that person who is working with me. Let me flip the other way side. It may be, so right now we were talking about negative. Let me flip the other way side, positive side. Like, as an organization, we have a culture of promoting diversity and inclusion in my organization, right? I hire a person who is not very open to diversity. What happens? It hampers my organization's culture. It happens a work culture that I've been trying to build for my organization. Flipping the side again, I hire a person, I find out that person is very much into social media supporting diversity. I can leverage that person in my organization to build that culture. Now, all these things would come out in a background check. They would give me positives and negatives about a person. It would give me the views about a person. It would give me the outlook about that person, which I can take, and I, as an organization, we can decide that how we want to use that. If it's a negative aspect, obviously we need to take an action or a steps or be careful about it. If it is a positive action, we can utilize this for the betterment of the working culture in my organization. We can make our organizations more safe with that person's attitude, and so on and so forth. Let's say if a person is a financial organization, if a person is working in a financial organization, it makes a lot of sense to do a check on what kind of financial credibility that person has. If it's been a person who is always a defaulter in the things that you do, that can only come out in a background check. Then it makes a risk factor for me that should I place this person in a financial process or a financial job or a financial role in my organization or not. So having said that, it makes a lot of, or it gives a lot of credibility whenever we do a background check to a depth, meaning not only the conventional checks to the other additional checks. Let's take an example. I find a case about a person who is who has a civil case, or is a traffic jumping guy. So it may not directly affect me. Obviously, we are not saying that a person it can happen for a positive or a negative. It may not be that I'm actually at fault, but definitely knowing that aspect, it gives the organization a visibility that how that person has or behaves when he is not in the organization. I get that visibility. Once I get that visibility, we know that how that person will come in. And in today's world with social media, with other things coming in, having views for something has some effect on working culture, on the safe work environment that we prefer to be in. See, earlier there was a demarcation. Once a person was leaving from job, we used to stop thinking about that, what that person was doing. But right now, that whole thought process, that whole approach has changed. Whatever I do off work, that also matters. Whatever I do in my personal time, that also matters to some extent. It's not that I don't have a personal freedom. It's not like that. But what I do, it should not be to such an extent that affects the organization that I'm working in. It should not be affecting, like every day. Let's take an example. I go out and I am addicted to some drugs, and I put it on social media. That affects the reputation of my organization that I'm working in. Or let's take an example. My organization is into medical business. Having a person who is addicted to a drug working in a medical organization who is working on a medical product affects the reputation of that organization. So having a deep dive, knowing a person, what he does affects every bit of the journey that organization has. Because we have to understand that whenever we are moving ahead with an organization, that leads to the growth of an industry. So it's all linked, meaning if all of us in each of our organizations are trying to mitigate a risk by doing a background check, it develops that industry very fast. It develops that segment in that country very fast. Let's take an example. I'm coming from an association which has been promoting information technology industry, IT industry. And then IT industry has been doing background checks. So some point of time, the employment has been increasing. Why? Because the confidence of the clients increased in the companies who were servicing them. So over a period of time, what was happening is the employment was increasing, the GDP was increasing, and at the same point of time, the whole ecosystem got increased. So what we're saying is background check is one of those hygiene factors which needs to be done very, very diligently. It is not a check in the box that sometimes all of us feel that we think that it is a check in the box, which is not that. It is not a tick in the box. If we do it correctly, it affects my organization, affects the industry that I'm in. It can be a medical industry, it can be an information technology industry, it can be a financial industry. It affects the industry. We have a number of incidents wherein something has gone wrong in an industry and in a company, and that has affected the industry also. But all this leads to one basic thing, that we need to do a background check thoroughly. And the more fast we adapt in doing a background check thoroughly about the person, it helps us. So going as we move forward, it holds at every step, at the organization level, at the industry level, and at the country level. Right now, as NASSCOM, we are trying to promote India as a safe destination for IT. So we are an association of organizations who are into IT, but the promotion, just see the promotion and the message that we're trying to give outside, that India is a safe destination for IT. Why? Because some point of time, doing a check at the organization level builds up that organization. It builds up the country, and then the messaging goes out to the world. So you see the growth that happens. You see the path that an organization is taking or the country is taking. So those are the very, very important aspects that we need to think of. Okay, I was just trying to see my notes, what I had thought that I would speak to. It was an impromptu one. Okay, so see, apart from this, there is another aspect to this, like, see, information that that is found out about a person, that also needs to get collated somewhere, right? So if, like in other countries, we have a centralized databases and all those things, right? You have a centralized database of people who are working there, what kind of history that they have. So as a country, as India, we are also building up those kind of things. Like we are also, obviously, definitely we started off late, but obviously we have started doing that thing, like creating central repositories, creating other IT systems wherein, those databases are coming up, those databases are getting linked and all those things. And obviously all these databases which are getting linked today will help us in getting this information faster, the information that we are seeking today. Like, let's take an example, your education certifications are going to DigiLocker. Like, so it is very, very easy to get that information back for a BGC check to verify that information. You don't need to hunt too much to verify that information. But at the end of the day, when the country is progressing with all this kind of systems, it's very important that we also start doing our basics in our own organizations. We start doing a background check, where the background check fraternity can help us in getting those checks done. And once we get that, we can use that information, both, as I said, both positive and negative information helps us in building our organization culture and the safe work environment. So that helps us as we move forward. I think that's from my side. I will leave to, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Anirban, for an excellent talk on the subject. And now our second speaker of the day is Colonel Dr. John Chinatra. Now, John is an alumnus of the National Defense Academy and the Indian Military Academy, and he served in the intelligence corps of the military. Currently, John is the executive director of Premier Consulting and Investigations Limited, which is an investigations and consulting firm specializing in background verification of employees and vendors, and does due diligence on companies for various purposes. He provides information based on which organizations can take considered decisions. He works with banks and insurance companies, healthcare, IT, BPO, and the ITES sectors. He is generally known as a turnaround specialist, having turned around 3 companies before he joined his present appointment. He served 21 years in the Army in the Intelligence Corps and has served 22 years outside the Army. He has mastered the art of persuasion and negotiation with government, labor, and the unions. His doctorate was on the study of an automobile manufacturer achieving turnaround using people, sales, and strategic marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Colonel John Chinatra. John, unmute yourself, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I must first thank all of you for the wonderful response and the comments that you have given me for the last webinar, which we had conducted in January. I'm really humbled by the response, and I thank you very much. And I hope that you will support us in all our future endeavors. Now, during the last webinar, I had covered the basic processes which we undertake in background verification and due diligence. Now, as you would remember, that now the background verification in India has evolved. And what you are doing in background verification is basically you are trying to profile an individual before you really hire him. In fact, I have a very strong point over here. Companies should ensure that they carry out background checks before a person is hired. Otherwise, it becomes something like a postmortem. Okay. So pre-employment background checks are very important. It should not be used like postmortem. Okay. And in the last webinar, I had covered the risks involved, how a principal employer is liable for the actions of all his employees and his contract staff. There are legal liabilities, and background checks mitigates the risk of losing your reputation. There are any number of examples where one employee has marred the reputation of a company which was built over decades. We just can't afford to do that. And as you know, in the corporate world, the key word for success is trust. If your clients and the industry does not trust you, you can say goodbye to business sooner or later. Okay. So the trust is the key word. And how do you build trust? By building credibility, being truthful, honest, ethical, empathetic. These are ways you do that. Now, in today's subject is even more important than the previous subject, which was the basics about background verification. Here we are trying to discuss how background verification can mitigate risk and ensure that you get the right cultural fit and you are able to grow a genuine, safe, and healthy work environment. the kind of checks which we can now do, for example, psychometric tests, social media profiling, CIBIL checks, media checks, criminal records, all these are being developed, and very soon, as Mr. Anirban brought out, and he's working very hard to get all this into one thing like what you have in the US. So it becomes very easy, it becomes cheap, it becomes available to every client who wants to do it. We really appreciate your work on that, Mr. Anirban. Now, one of the things which I was speaking to some of my friends in the US, with the gun culture in the US, I hope I turn out to be wrong. A shooting in a workplace is only waiting to happen. I pray that what I say doesn't come true, but the liability of negligent hiring by those US corporates is very, very real and very, very severe. The juries will not spare the owners of those businesses, I can assure you that. And my friends who are basically from the background verification industry and the HR community, they are very, very worried about it. And this is waiting to happen. I hope I'm wrong, but this is what the input I get. Like last time, I covered a story where I was almost hauled up for harboring terrorists because one of our employees was suspected of that, although it didn't happen. There, it is BGV which saved me. Now, in this webinar, I will briefly cover two real life incidents that has happened in my career. First was a BPO where we had recommended that you should carry out drug checks. Okay. These are very, very legal and very, very right. It is done with the consent of the employee. In one of these BPOs are basically manned by young people. Okay. And I know of a case, I can't give you the details, but they hired a suspect person because it was very clear what I mean, looking at his social media profile, it was very, very clear that he would be very, very suspect to it. They hired him and they found almost 25% of their workforce addicted in the next 1 year. 25% of their entire workforce. I don't need to explain the seriousness of this. The second story which I want to narrate is of a senior person from his social media and his psychometric tests. It was very obvious that he was more of a open culture kind of a person, quite permissive in his outlook. We had pointed it out in the social media profiling, and later on it turned out to be accused of sexual harassment. This could well have been avoided and the reputation could have been saved. So these are two examples. These are very common examples. I'm sure all of you have known of such cases and been, but these could be really mitigated. And that is why I believe that pre-employment, that is background verification checks which are carried out before a person is given the offer letter also, and of course the appointment letter, is a must. And if you actually study a background verification report, any experienced HR person will very, I mean, it is like an open book. You can clearly make out, will this person fit into this company culture, which was very well highlighted by Anirban. You straight away know, will he fit into this culture or not? Secondly, does he have a criminal record? Is he likely to get into CIBIL checks? Shows that he has got too many liabilities. So he can fall prey to temptations. So it becomes so very important that background checks are carried out thoroughly well before a person is taken in. Now, we do a check which we call exit interview services with analytics. What we actually do is, for companies, we carry out exit interviews of employees who have left the organization, whose full and final has been settled, maybe 3 months or later. So they have got no axe to grind. We have developed questionnaires which are exhaustive, which with the aim of trying to assess what are the conflicts, what is the politics that is going on, what are the sexual harassment propensity over there, what is the groupism in that, what is the internal politics, and these are assessed. We first carry out, we give it, we have an assessment platform in one of our group companies. We use that. The candidate or the ex-employee answer these questions, and based on that, I carry out an in-depth interview. I'm basically an HR person, okay? And I try to analyze what are the lessons that are learned, what are the actions to be taken, and for these companies, every 6 months, we give a diagnostic report, which indicates to the client, especially the CHRO or the director HR, what is the health of the work environment in his company. He doesn't have to accept the recommendation which I do, but it will go into his mind, and future actions will be in some way, some small little way, affect his future decisions. In fact, most of these CHROs are far more competent than what I am, but they are very, very wise people. They know what this is, but they all need the inputs, and that is what we do. All right. Now, as far as background verification checks are concerned, there are a lot of inputs which indicates to the company that this is a person who's had political affiliations, who's had extreme views on religious and communal matters. These don't debar a person from being offered a job, but it is worthwhile for the management to know that this person is vulnerable to such things. It also indicates how well he will fit into a team, how well he will be able to lead a team, how he can orient the individual goals with the organizational goals. All these are great value addition to the culture of the company. And that is why I always highlight every chance I get to speak to CEOs and director HRs, I make it a point to emphasize to them that please do not consider this as a cost. And trust me, I'm not trying to oversell. It is basically for the health of that organization and to get inputs. There is nothing that you need to, it is not compulsory that you need to follow our recommendations, but at least you may like to consider it very, very seriously. Right? Now, the last point which I wanted to emphasize is that no single, see, most of these advanced checks, they can't be graded as red, orange, or green. They are only, you can only draw conclusions from them. And if you see the psychometric test which we conduct, the personality profile of that person becomes an open book. The management can clearly see what kind of a person he is, what are his strengths, what are his weaknesses psychologically, and which is the role that he best fits into. You, of course, waited for the experience which he has, but as Anirban said, that okay, if he is strongly believes in inclusivity and things like that, you can leverage that strength to build your own culture, healthy culture. So that is the importance of background verification. I will always emphasize this in every forum which I believe, and I'm sure that due thought to this will mitigate the risks of many great companies. That's all I have to say, sir. Back to you.
Thank you very much, John. I have a question for either you or Neepan. Anyone can sort of, what are the steps that an organization should actually take to ensure background verification processes are up to date and effective in promoting a healthy work culture for a safe environment, for a safe working area?
Anirban, you take the lead.
So, two things. One is what Dr. John was saying, that you need to do a pre-employment check. That's one. So there are a couple of things that are pre-employment, which needs to be done as a basic hygiene factor. Then to keep the work environment safe, the organization culture as a top thing, there are some checks that needs to be done regularly. It's not that I've done one check and I've left it like that. It's not like that. Like, let's take an example, social media check. Social media profiling about how the guy behaves after he has joined the organization. So all those things can be, see, every organization can decide the frequency based on the risk capability or risk mitigation capabilities that they have. But the fact is that they need to do some checks regularly. Maybe a legal check after a certain period of time. Maybe a drug check after a certain period of time. Those things can give a lot of leads. Maybe a social media check after some, but that period of the or the threshold of those outcomes and the period of in which I need to do that check regularly can be decided by each organization. But the fact is that it needs to be done regularly. It has to be. But right now, I think everybody thinks that once a person is onboarded, everybody thinks it as a cost and drops it, but which is not the fact. The fact is that if a person is behaving erratically after the person just joined, maybe after 5 years or 10 years, at least the organization should be having that information and can foresee that what can go wrong somewhere. But we don't think in that line. We never think in that line. Once a pre-employment is done, checking the box is done, we forget about it, which is a very, very wrong thing. It's a continuous process. It has to be done. It evolves and so on and so forth. But yes, it is a regular thing that needs to get done with certain in a certain period after a certain amount of time. Behavior of a person can change. My attitude can change. All those needs to be tracked for a healthy workplace. Definitely, for sure.
One of the things that which we are forgetting nowadays, and which I used to do very early in my career, that was as to how many people are dependent on a particular individual that he has to sustain. So if I'm the breadwinner, how many people are dependent on me? And in India, it can be a very adverse situation, which can cause pressure on the individual, because if his earnings are not sufficient to support his large family, then it is likely that he at some point of time, he will crack and do something which is not warranted.
Absolutely agree. So all those things are very, very important, that it's not only that individualistic check, it's a check about what is his social status, about what he does, what is his financial status. Everything needs to be needs to be investigated. The whole reason for this is, see, some point of time they would affect an organization. So in either way, it would affect. Like if I'm in a process, I might have a propensity to steal the data and say and make some money out of it. I can have any kind of propensity. That every individual organization gets exposed to a data whenever they're working for an organization, right? And the moment there is a shortage that I can't meet, people would think differently. That is a very, very important thing. That finding about a person, that what he does, how is he socially, how is he financially there, very, very important aspects about an individual.
I will just add one small little thing. Like when a person is hired, he's financially very stable, especially financial guys from the finance department. Now, somewhere down the line, this guy starts investing in the stock market and it's a huge loss.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if you carry out a CIBIL check periodically, it won't come as a surprise to you. And you can counsel him, you can even help him to keep away from those temptations. So in fact, some of the checks which we encourage companies to do regularly, 6 months, maybe 1 year, according to the affordability. One is a criminal check. Anyone can get into a crime sometime. Absolutely. Second is social media. You understand his lifestyle so clearly. Third is his CIBIL check. And this inputs which you get about the organization from the exit interview analytics is also a very, very positive feedback for chief people officers, director HRs, and even CEOs.
I think it's an excellent sort of a situation that organizations need to follow. Mr. Sipal, you had a question that you were wanting to sort of talk of.
Yes, I wanted one point that when somebody refers you for background verification, should he delineate and point out that this is thing you will check, or holistically you are required to check? If you are required to check holistically, then what are the essentials and what are the non-essentials in that checking?
May I answer this question, Anirban?
Please go ahead.
See, in fact, I had covered it in the last webinar also. The need of specific checks depends on three factors. First is the level of the employee. Second is the role which he is doing. Is he going into the finance department, or is he going to the HR department, or is he going to the credit control, whatever. The third check, which is very, very important, is which is the location and which is the industry. Like if you talk about certain places like Banjara Hills, you'll see a lot of fake education certificates. You will find fake experience letters given. So you know what to look for. Okay. And actually, when you collate all the information, things start becoming very, very clear what you should do. Does that answer your question, sir?
My question is partially answered.
Okay.
Question is, you want to know the hierarchical status of a person for whom you want to do verification. You want also to know the particular sector or particular department in which he's working. You will also like to know that what environment he is working, location, as you said. No, that's all right. I am saying the organization as such will ask you, any organization, anywhere. Checking is your responsibility. I mean, the person who is given this job. Organization should give you, okay, it gives you location, it gives you the hierarchical structure, position of that man. It also asks you that this is a financial man or this is. After that, these are only 3 or 4 other points that you can ask the organization, what are your these things? And after that, you go ahead. Now, my question is that in all the cases, in most of the cases, the psychological build-up of man matters. As Mr. Anirban pointed out, that you also said that he can be having some propensities. He may be having some psychometric problems. He may have a psychological problem. The psychometric test can give you. Now, question is, as a background checking, will you go all into detail? In every case, you do the psychometric test, or in some cases, you do the psychometric test, or in some cases, you leave it. Question is that you are being given a job, that you get me this test done. Out of that, my point is that you will consider, all right, these are my essentials, A, B, C, D, and these are less essentials. So my point was that, holistically speaking, what would be the essentials of this? Because
I've understood your question completely, sir. Sir, now we claim to be background verification experts, and it is our duty to advise that company, their director HR or their CEO, that, sir, for this particular profile, these are the checks you should do. For a lower profile, these are the checks which you should do. A person located over here, it is my karma, it is my duty, because I pretend to be the expert in this background verification. And of course, the command decision will always remain with the CEO or the director HR. But I must recommend, and remember, I should not try to make money on by recommending things which are not essential. So, keeping the cost and the requirement in mind, I must honestly recommend the checks which are likely to give him the best returns for his money. That is my moral responsibility, and that is how you build trust. You can fool a person once, twice, but third time he'll know. What kind of a guy I am. He'll stop trusting me. And if my client stop trusting me, I'm finished.
Thank you.
So one of the questions that have been bothering me is, we are moving from a physical verification to a technology-based verification. How is the transformation taking place? How successful it is? How reliable it is? And what is the future of this industry?
Mr. Anirban, you are the right man to take up this with your technology prowess.
Okay, sure. So, see, you're very rightly, you're absolutely correct, I think, and that whole shift started in a major way during this COVID phase. Like with COVID has been some point of time has been a blessing wherein we moved to a digital phase from a physical phase. So I think that shift has happened during the COVID phase. So yes, you're right. A lot of checks have moved into a digital environment, and definitely that is the way forward. There have been a lot of APIs that has come in, even that OpenStack is getting developed. So a lot of those data which was earlier not available for integrations would now be available. Now, once that is done, in future, ID checks, court record checks, the basic financial checks, all those things would be totally digital. I don't think there would be any digital in the sense right now, even it is digital, data is digital, but the thing is it would be all API based, means it would be instant in near future, like in other countries. So the way what we are saying is that whether I should hire this person or not, that decision making, that what is my risk when I hire this person, that would come instant in next future. And I think as a BGS industry, I think all of us would be moving into that phase only, wherein everybody would be integrating their systems with the APIs and all those things. I think one small move we did, not at the country level, at the industry level we did. I think one of my team members would have approached Dr. John also. What we did is, employment check is something that all of us struggle, because that's something, the record is digital in the organization, but that's still a manual process, in the sense that you're very right. Like organization says that, can you verify this X record of this X employee of that X organization? So email chain goes, or maybe you have a system to send that email chain back to that employer, the employer response and all those things. What we are trying to do as an industry is we're trying to push that, because we realize that while government is developing a lot of these interfaces for digital verifications, for technology-based verifications, we also realize that employment check is still manual. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that as an industry, can't we do that? So what we are approaching IT companies, are saying that because you give the data back to the NASSCOM database. So there is something called exit employment database. And we're telling all our background check partners, if you get a verification request for this X company, please access the database and you get it instant. Integrate your own background checking platform with an API with the system, and you get an instant check. You don't have to, there is no email, there is nothing. It's an instant check that gets done. And that is what we're trying to push back to the members, saying that let's make it digital. Why are we all wasting time to do it? Your background check partners would give the data, but it would be an individual organization based. We're saying that as an industry, if you give the data back to the central database and you ask your background check members, and all our members have been informed that whatever data we are getting from whichever members we are informing, we are saying that these are the 5 data we have got, these are the 10 data we have got, these are the 2 data we have got. Please access the system and take the data and do a verification. And it's an instant verification. So you very rightly said that next couple of years, the evolvement would be technology based, would be moving totally digital, in the sense that maximum number of checks would come totally instant. So right now, that gestation period that we have for every checks would get minimized. It would get reduced, and if not zero, it would get reduced totally.
Anirban, as a follow-up to this, you see, if you are collating data from all the organizations, how does it ensure or conflict with the confidentiality and privacy of employee background information, which is supposed to be confidential in any case. So
Absolutely.
the moment you take it on, you need to have the assent of the employee that
Absolutely.
all his previous data should be available to NASSCOM.
Correct. So what happens is, what we're trying to balance this is, like, let's take an example. You have a data of organization A in the database, right? Now let's take an example. If somebody, maybe it's a BGC company who wants to access the database, the first step is he should be uploading the consent that is taken from the employee to verify the data. So that's the first step. Once he submits the consent, then only the data gets transferred, but that data is shown, otherwise not. And what we do is, like, since employment check is something that does not always involve an employee, so we are assuming that every employer, whenever they are sending a background check request to my background check partners, they would be giving a consent letter. And what we are telling our background check partners that you upload that letter in the system to access the data. So that's how we're trying to handle the privacy law, because otherwise it's a major risk for us.
It's a major risk, and also with the European companies with GDPR and all, you're always going to be in violation. Should
Absolutely
become a holder of information.
Absolutely.
So it will have limited. The initiative will be limited in scope because of violation of various laws of various other countries.
Correct. You're absolutely right. But what we're thinking is that,
and that limited scope which you have, because you are not going to violate the confidentiality of another company, the limited scope which you have for verification, that's exactly what I said, that you have to get into certain essentials, because you are, I'm saying, the person who is being given the job. I'm not talking about we as an organization must get it thorough investigation, but the person who is doing the background investigation, his task is rather difficult, because it is not always possible to judge the inclinations of the person. John has touched indirectly and so. What are his criminal affiliation in his talk, he said? What are his political affiliations in talk, he said? All these things, you see, taken out of the context may be very, very difficult for you to do. But in the organization, I have an experience, and Pawanji had an experience, a very good, a trusted person created problem with us for no reason or rhyme. Like, I want this much money, I want that much money, writing this letter, so we have to get rid of him or her somehow. So I'm not very sure that the professional, I'm a professional in the background verification, how will the money he is to charge, the amount which he has to charge for background verification will depend on the type of verification he has to do. We informed him of the hierarchy, we have informed him everything. Still, he may like to have certain things which are very difficult to compile. So my submission was that probably there must be some metrics, so these are the essential, these are the second level, this is the third level, some sort of data may have been prepared for people who have got the background verification done and getting done verification.
You're absolutely right, sir. And that is the reason why we give different packages to the same company. So if he's carrying out the background verification of a director, these are the checks and this is the cost. If it is middle level and in this location, this is the price, this is the cost. That is the only way a contract can work smoothly and efficiently. So we do that, sir.
I have one more question. Sorry, John, to continue. Anirban, this question is to you, and since you're at NASSCOM and then in the position that you hold, what is your advice to organizations as to which background company they should hire for their checks?
Okay, see, it's something like this, like, there are a lot many players in the market, definitely. It's like a lot many players in the market. Dr. John represents some, maybe there will be somebody in the call who will be representing some other organization, definitely. See, my take would be on this subject is that in my last couple of 10, 11 years that I've been, or rather almost like 14 years that I've been auditing all these background check organizations, I've seen that, see, everybody has some strength, and everybody has some value add that they give back to the industry. Like, Right. So it's like something like this, like everybody makes soaps, right? But every soap is different. Somebody may like the perfume of the soap, somebody may like the lather that it creates, somebody may like the size that it has, somebody likes the way it holds. So what I'm saying is that all the background check companies has something to offer. Now, for the people who are trying to take the services of the background check companies, they should look for a partner who gives them the right advice. First thing, like Dr. John was saying, that first thing is very important, that giving a right advice is very, very important. That's one. Second thing is you need to understand the what kind of risk that you're mitigating. So if that background check partner has a strength in that, leverage that. So there may be somebody who is very good in doing particular check. They have built up their capabilities in an excellent way for a particular amount of check. They will tell you that I have my maximum capability in this. I have all the checks, but this is my maximum capability in this. Leverage that. See, right now, I don't think there is a scope of having a, see, in risk, there is nothing called favoritism. To mitigate a risk, you should go with whatever mitigates your risk. And that you have to identify every person who wants to do, or every organization who wants to do a background check needs to identify the risk that you're setting, identify the strength of the background check companies who are coming and meeting them, and then choose a partner who is supporting them. And moreover to it, keep in mind the person who is giving them the right advice, nothing like it. Because our organization who is trying to avail a background check service is not an expert in this. Let's understand this. I'm not a background check expert. Like the partners who are supporting the background check, they're the experts. They are day in, day out. That is their business. My business is policy making. My business is to sell a product. I'm not in the background check. So I should take the input of a person who is best in this and go by his advice, not making an advice and telling him that you should follow this. Go by the advice that the risk mitigation organization is telling me. If I try to tell him that you do it in this way, it doesn't make sense, which is currently happening. I know that it is happening, that you do a particular check in this way. That's so wrong. Go by the way the background check organization is supporting, telling you that, okay, this check needs to be done in a particular way, and this is the best way to do it. Follow that process. That's the ideal way to do it.
Thank you. Are there any questions that anyone has, please? Since there are no questions, let me hand the proceedings back to the President to conclude the session.
Sure.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Captain Pawan Alwalia, for being a very good moderator and for the questions you have putting. I only want to say that Anirban has beautifully covered how the background verification has evolved. He has touched the evolution process of background process. He has also emphasized certain points. I'm not necessarily that you should be open to diversity, but this is one of the examples he has given, that they should, first, a person like is probably an introvert and is not open to diversity, but our organization may like to have a person open to diversity. So there are certain points which he has emphasized. Then the trust point has been emphasized by Dr. John. What is the trust level of that person? And also, by and large, it depends the organization which wants verification gives certain inputs. And on the basis of that, the right advice has to come. So that all is very not so easy a process as people think. The background verification is really a very technical and very thorough job to be done. And it is important to do background verification for your own organization, because good background verification can also provide you insight not only to the criminal history of the person, not only to the bankruptcy history of the person, not only to some civil litigation history of that person, but many more things. For that, he has to, the person who is getting background done or is appointed by us to get the, he has to go into all the details. Therefore, in the Indian context, probably it should be also including the social background, also the political, and to some extent, the criminal background also. So in this context, there are a lot of variation from place to place. And then Dr. John has pointed out location. Yes, location is very important, because if that person has certain inclination of mind towards an leftist organization, extreme leftist organization, and you are also, your organization is also located in a place which is already dominated by certain leftists, it may be difficult for us to get that type of product. In any case, any good background verification, should not be considered as an additional cost to the company. The company who is getting background verification should not consider the background as additional cost. It is really very important for the safe environment, for safe cultural environment and the safety of the organization. In the verification, he has to ensure that a person is really gels into the new organization. But still, there may be problems. That's not that they can give you anything foolproof, because when it comes into a particular environment, he may not put on or may not gel into that environment, and he may create some problems. So you cannot be very sure. Yet it's very important. And I again and again have been emphasizing that the psychological mindset of the person to be tested is very important to be gone into. And I think most of things you'll come to know from the psychological background, and also to some extent, if you do conduct psychometric tests, it's considered very fashionable to say a psychometric test, but it is a very difficult process. To undertake psychometric tests is not so easy a process. It is quite a complicated process, and it involves money because you have to get specialists who are in psychometry. So on these points taken into consideration, I think the most important thing is that we should not be stingy as for payment for background verification is concerned. With these words, I thank both the speaker and the moderator and the other delegates and the person who have been always with us, like Deepak Mehta and Harjeet Sandhu, for having again come to us in this particular session. I was expecting that Harjeet will be able to give something about Interpol.
No, sir. Actually, after you close, I cannot be speaking afterwards because
closing. Before closing,
both John and Anirban, they covered almost everything. I
saw your comments on writing. You sent that I saw. That is only
I was. That is writing few things because I have investigated quite a lot of people whose verifications were not done properly or they could not do because in fact, a lot of them, one on the degrees, people get every job they apply, they have a new fake degree. So a lot of those cases. Just if I would add just one sentence, before this verification, one is pre-recruitment verification. Afterward, they covered both very well. But pre-recruitment, many times people send a written questionnaire and nobody wants to commit in writing. When you commit in writing, you think that it can come back. So I always say that, if you really want, give a call to the person and then the person can speak more. I'm talking of physical verification, not that psychometric and other things.
Yeah, physically, when you question, sometimes he's hesitant because if he is guilty, you're right.
Yeah.
If he's guilty, he's not right to give answer.
Because when I give a call to somebody and ask, then their feedback is different. But when you send a written questionnaire, the feedback is different. Then some very sensitive jobs we have to do, like every annual disclosure, financial disclosure, any property. Then we get external company to verify. So I think John covered that very well. So I wanted to speak on that, but since John covered, so I did not go to. Thank you, sir. That's all. I think they covered all what I wanted to say.
You have added, Harjeet. Thank you very much. The addition agenda is more important than the subject as such. But what I was thinking that probably we were expecting you to question something, but you have only added to that, and that is also very, very valuable for us. Thank you very much for adding, because everywhere there are certain difficulties. We set up Interpol long back, but now Interpol has lost its relevance. It has become just a post box. So
I was there for 4 years, sir.
I am telling you that everything loses relevance with the passage of time. When we started Interpol, it was considered very big because all the countries were coordinating and they wanted this sort of organization. Today they say it's also a post box. It cannot direct anyone. It cannot issue one. It may not. It just pass on this information. It cannot say that you arrest it. So with the passage of time, everything changes the result. Because when we were there, we were only asked the written question or background verification, send person to a particular police station, get what is it doing, what has been doing, what is background, and or send person to a Patwari and file or something. Today, there's a lot of development has taken place and evolution has been described beautifully by Nirban. I'm thankful to all of you for being with us this evening. Our next session is on turmoil in Pakistan and its implication on India, impact on India. That is, the persons who are going to come, the panelists, are two generals. And of course, I am there and the coordinator will be there. So this is turmoil in Pakistan and its impact on India. It is going to be a panel discussion. And I'm sure this panel discussion will be liked by many people. In fact, this is going to be a very important panel discussion, and I look forward to the delegates to join us. The dates will be communicated when we send them the emails, etc., and mailer, etc. Thank you very much for the session. And with these words, I conclude the session with my very, very hearty thanks to everyone who has come here. Thank you very much indeed.
So once I just like to add one thing. General Parnaik was the Northern Army commander, and General Katoj was the chairman of CLAWS, that is Center for Land and Air Warfare Studies. So their knowledge on Pakistan is intense and almost overwhelmingly good. And their predictions and their advice is sought by not only the Indian government, but governments overseas also.
So you can imagine the information or the level of discussion, panel discussion. We are proud that always we have got very good speakers, and we are proud of this, is proud of that. And we'll try to carry on this tradition to the extent possible, because again, I say it's an evolutionary process. We do not know how far we are able to meet the need of the times to come. Thank you very much again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nirmal.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sipal.
Thank you, Anirban.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.